This is the voice of educator and content creator Julian Berrian, delivering content for your listening pleasure and edification from Chadron, Nebraska. My very special guests today are activist and educator Dr. Willa Cofield and multimedia specialist Karen Riley. Dr. Cofield recently co-authored a book entitled The 9 O'Clock Whistle, Stories of the Freedom Struggles for Civil Rights in Enfield, North Carolina. Karen Riley, Dr. Cofield's cousin and media consultant, has played a very important supporting role in not only the publishing of this book, but also the production of a movie of the same name and subject matter. Dr. Cofield, Karen Riley, welcome.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
Dr. Cofield, I know that you have quite a bit of life experience in general, much of which has informed this book. And I hope you don't mind if I share your age with our listening audience. Do you mind if I share your age?
Of course not.
As of this recording, Dr. Cofield is 96 years old. What is the secret to your longevity and clarity?
I've just been fortunate, I guess. And I've been busy. I've been pretty active most of my life. And I think that's gone a long way to keeping me alive and healthy.
Okay. So would you agree that we're only as old as we feel?
I think that's right.
I know that many people have a general idea of what the Black Civil Rights Movement involved, particularly in the 1950s and 1960s here in the United States. And a lot of mainstream conversations about the Black Civil Rights Movement revolve solely around segregation, but the struggle also revolved around abject discrimination. And so I'd like you to share a few examples of racial discrimination which took place in Enfield, North Carolina, informed by a lot of the policies.
Before the Civil Rights Movement, Black people were compromised in many ways by forces beyond that community itself. The whole economy was changing in the 60s. What had been an agricultural-based economy was changing. In the early part of the century, most Black people had earned a living by working on a farm. But in the 1950s, the farms were being mechanized. And so these shifting forces were causing Black people to have to leave the farms. Some of them moved into the little town of Enfield. Much of the economy, much of the financial income came from tourists who were on Highway 301, which came through the town. But beginning in the 60s, there was an interstate built. And so the traffic that had come through Enfield bypassed the town. And that meant many of the businesses dried up. And that affected the livelihood of many people who lived in Enfield. But the region was characterized by poor schools, poor health care, the lack of job opportunities for Blacks, certainly. In our neighborhoods, almost no paved streets. There were no sidewalks. We had no sewage from the city. Unless you happened to live close to a white neighborhood, you did not have sewage services.
And so these discriminatory practices involve services, some can argue basic services, not being provided to the local Black residents. Am I correct?
Yes, of course, you are.
And yet, you all pay taxes.
We did. The town was very narrowly organized on the basis of race. Everything was segregated. The schools, the churches, the neighborhoods. The downtown section was relatively off limits for Black people, except during those hours of shopping.
And you mentioned the 9 o'clock whistle itself.
The title of the book, The 9 O'Clock Whistle, was based on the fact that at 9 o'clock on Saturday nights, all Black people were expected to go home. And this was adding insult to injury. I'm not exactly sure when that practice began. As a little child, I don't remember that. But my guess is that sometimes after World War II, when more people moved into Enfield from the farms, that they began blowing the whistle. And this practice continued. And I believe from the things I've read and heard, blowing the whistle really harkened back to the time of slavery, when the enslaved people were made aware of the time to get up, the time to go to the fields, the time to stop for a lunch or dinner break, and then the time to go home. And I always felt that the whistle was related to that early practice that was followed during the slavery period.
And so it began during the period of slavery, ended, and then was brought back into vogue, if you will, when the population of the town swelled. Well, Dr. Cofield, what would happen if a Black person was downtown on a Saturday evening and ignored that 9 o'clock whistle?
That person would probably be arrested, given a warning, put in jail, and would have to come back if he was able to get a bail and leave and go home, then come back to court on Monday night. So that it was a very severe punishment if you happen to be caught on the streets after 9 o'clock.
Wow.
It was a thing that was embarrassing. It was insulting. If you happen to have out-of-town guests who were unfamiliar with the whistle, you were always embarrassed to tell them what was going on and why it was blown. But we just accepted it as we accepted going to separate schools, sitting in the back of the bus, riding on a different car on the trains. It was just the Southern way of life.
If you're just tuning in, this is the voice of Julian Berrian. I'm interviewing educator and activist Dr. Willa Cofield about her co-authored book, The 9 O'Clock Whistle. So, on top of services being denied to Black people, on top of the segregation, compounded with that whistle, many Blacks were discouraged from and prevented from voting.
Very few people could vote at that time. It was very few Black people, that is, could vote. So when my husband went down and registered, tried to file to run for the town commission, it began to change our community. When he filed, people began becoming interested in registering. That just spread to envelop the whole community. And we began to challenge other forms of discrimination and segregation.
Did it culminate in violence at any point, Dr. Cofield?
There was always a fear of violence. We never knew when the threats would be acted on. We never knew exactly who did it, but they burned a cross on our lawn. And we were awakened 2 o'clock in the night saying there's something on your backyard is afire. And when we looked out the window, there was this blazing cross. So that was the very first show of resistance from the dominant white community. And we got telephone calls telling us that our house was going to be burned down if my husband didn't withdraw from the political race.
And the rest is well documented in your book.
Right.
I don't want to give away too much of how things unfolded.
That's right.
I think my listeners certainly know what to do for the complete account.
Absolutely.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the book's co-authors, Mildred Sexton and Cynthia Samuleson. Can you please tell our listening audience what connections they have to you and to the civil rights struggle and to the creation of the book?
Cynthia and Mildred were students at Enfield High School, which was the black high school in Enfield. And they were both very much involved in this movement. Cynthia's mother, whose name was Lily, was just one of the key leaders of the movement. And she and I were the two teachers who were out in the streets with the students. That's Cynthia's mother. Mildred was a student who lived very near the school, a very bright student, very active, played basketball, president of the student council. And she very early aligned herself with the group of students who were challenging segregation. She was very courageous.
So both were integral parts of the movement and integral parts of the creation of this book. Karen, can you give a timeline of how long it took to put everything together?
Well, you started the book in 2017?
That's right.
Yes. The book became the framework for the documentary. In the documentary, you will see the authors reading from excerpts from the book. The project itself, before the book became reality, there was footage shot as far back as 2014, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I came on board in 2017.
That's right.
And we were trying to get the story together. It came out in reverse. We did the film first. And I'm just amazed at the process in which it came together.
Excellent. What were some of the challenges that you had to overcome while putting together the book in particular?
Just getting the people together was a challenge. And then having them commit to join me in this project that was not very well defined at that time. And we started out with meetings on Sunday evenings at 6:00. And we would just talk about that period in our lives and what happened, what we could remember. We were able to keep together from 2017 to 2025.
Dr. Cofield, if there's one overarching lesson that you'd like readers of your book or viewers of the movie to embrace, what is that one overarching lesson?
It would be that you don't have to accept things that you know are wrong, that you can challenge them. And if you do, people will help you. And the chances are, if you keep working at it, that you will be able to achieve your goal.
Where can people go if they want more information about the book or the documentary?
You can visit 9whistle.com. That's the official website for the 9 o'clock whistle project.
Okay, so the number 9.
It's the numeral 9, yes.
9whistle.com. Dr. Cofield, Karen Riley, thank you so much for joining me. And to the listeners joining me from Radioland or from wherever else you've been listening, I hope that you enjoyed the program. This is Julian Berrian signing off.